In a previous exploration, we delved into the intriguing world of a Japanese prophetic manga, a work of fiction that has captivated audiences with its eerily accurate predictions about global events, blurring the lines between art and foresight. This discussion laid the groundwork for a broader conversation about the cultural fascination with prophecy, a theme that transcends borders and eras. Building on this foundation, today's focus shifts to an equally compelling narrative: the claims of an American seer whose prophecy for 2025 has sparked intense debate, promising nothing short of a world-shaping turning point. While the Japanese manga wove its predictions into a fictional framework, blending storytelling with speculative futurism, this American prophecy adopts a more direct tone, positioning 2025 as a pivotal year that will redefine geopolitics, technology, and societal norms. The seer's warnings, steeped in visions of radical global transformation, suggest a convergence of crises and breakthroughs, from climate-related upheavals and economic destabilization to breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and energy systems. Unlike the abstract allegories of the manga, these predictions are framed as urgent calls to prepare for imminent disruption, resonating with audiences grappling with the uncertainties of our current era. The allure of such prophecies lies in their ability to articulate collective anxieties and hopes, offering a narrative through which to process rapid change. The Japanese manga, for instance, gained traction not only for its storytelling, but for its uncanny alignment with real-world events, leading many to question whether art can inadvertently tap into deeper truths. Similarly, the American seer's 2025 prophecy taps into contemporary fears of collapse and longing for renewal, framing the near future as a crossroads between decline and rebirth. Skeptics dismiss these claims as opportunistic sensationalism, arguing that vague apocalyptic predictions are timeless tropes designed to exploit uncertainty. Yet proponents argue that the specificity of the 2025 timeline and its alignment with existing trends in climate science, AI development, and geopolitical tensions lends it a chilling plausibility. What unites these two prophetic narratives, despite their cultural and stylistic differences, is their reflection of humanity's timeless quest to find meaning in chaos. Whether through the allegorical lens of fiction or the stark declarations of a self-proclaimed seer, such stories serve as mirrors, revealing our deepest fears about the fragility of civilization and our latent hope for a radical reinvention of society. As 2025 approaches, the discourse surrounding these prophecies will likely intensify, inviting us to confront not only the potential realities they describe, but also the psychological and cultural forces that make us so eager to believe or dismiss them. Ultimately, whether these predictions prove accurate or not, they underscore a universal truth. In an age of unprecedented change, the stories we tell about the future are as much about understanding the present as they are about forecasting what lies ahead. Jeane Dixon, the renowned American clairvoyant whose prophecies captivated 20th century audiences, first demonstrated her uncanny abilities in early childhood, with family anecdotes painting a portrait of a girl seemingly attuned to forces beyond the ordinary. At just 5 years old, she reportedly foresaw her grandfather's death, a prediction that unsettled her family when it tragically materialized. This early manifestation of her gift was neither an isolated incident nor dismissed as childish imagination. 2 years later, at age 7, she again unnerved her relatives by announcing the imminent arrival of a family dog, a claim met with skepticism until a stray puppy appeared at their doorstep days later, mirroring her precise description. These childhood episodes, recurring with unsettling accuracy, positioned Dixon as an enigmatic figure within her household, sparking both awe and apprehension about the source and scope of her visions. The trajectory of her life shifted dramatically. In 1911, when a chance encounter with an Egyptian palm reader during a family trip to California transformed curiosity about her abilities into a sense of cosmic destiny. The palmist, allegedly struck by the young girl's aura, reportedly studied her palms before handing her a crystal ball, an object that would later become synonymous with Dixon's public persona. In a moment steeped in theatrical mysticism, the stranger proclaimed that Jeane was destined for global renown as a prophet, a seer of seers who would counsel powerful figures and forewarn humanity of looming crises. This validation from an apparent authority in esoteric traditions lent weight to her family's growing belief in her gifts, framing her abilities not as random anomalies, but as part of a preordained path. The palm reader's crystal ball, far from becoming a mere prop, evolved into Dixon's primary tool for divination, symbolizing her transition from a child with eerie hunches to a self-aware mystic honing her craft. Critics would later argue that such origin stories, particularly the exoticized encounter with the Egyptian figure, smacked of mythmaking, designed to legitimize her status in an era fascinated by Orientalist tropes and spiritualism. Yet supporters pointed to the consistency of these accounts across decades, as well as the tangible outcomes of her early predictions, as evidence of an innate gift that defied rational explanation. What remains undeniable is how these formative experiences shaped Dixon's identity. The childhood premonitions established a pattern of accessing hidden knowledge, while the palm reader's intervention framed her abilities as both a sacred burden and a public service. By adolescence, she had begun systematically interpreting her visions, blending Christian mysticism with astrology and numerology, a syncretic approach that would define her later career. Though skeptics dismissed her as a shrewd self-promoter, capitalizing on Cold War anxieties, the psychological potency of her origin story, the prodigious child prophet, validated by ancient wisdom traditions, cemented her cultural resonance. These foundational episodes, whether viewed through the lens of faith or skepticism, underscore humanity's enduring fascination with those who claim to pierce the veil of time, and the complex interplay between personal mythos and historical moment that transforms curious anecdotes into legend. Jeane Dixon's reputation as a preeminent 20th century clairvoyant rests heavily on a handful of high-profile predictions that, when examined through the lens of history, straddle the line between astonishing accuracy and provocative ambiguity. Among her most cited prophecies is her alleged warning to actress Carole Lombard in January 1942, urging her to avoid air travel, a caution Lombard reportedly dismissed before boarding a flight home from a war bond rally. 6 days later, the plane crashed into Nevada's Potosi Mountain, killing Lombard and 21 others. This tragic incident, occurring at the height of Lombard's fame, became a cornerstone of Dixon's mystique, framed as a chilling example of her ability to foresee mortal peril. Yet critics note that Dixon's admirers retroactively amplified The prediction's specificity. Accounts differ on whether she explicitly named Lombard or broadly warned against flights during that period, a nuance often glossed over in retellings. Similarly contentious is her November 1944 declaration that President Franklin D. Roosevelt had no more than 6 months left in office, a forecast that proved eerily precise when Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage on April 12, 1945, just 5 months later. While supporters cite this as irrefutable proof of her gift, skeptics counter that Roosevelt's visibly deteriorating health, widely reported in the press, made such a prediction less a supernatural feat than an educated guess. Dixon's political foresight extended beyond presidential mortality. In 1944, she reportedly informed then-Senator Harry S. Truman that he would ascend to the presidency, a claim Truman himself later corroborated, though with characteristic pragmatism. "I laughed it off," he admitted, "until I found myself behind that desk." While Truman's sudden rise following Roosevelt's death lent credence to her prediction, critics argue that as vice president, Truman was the obvious successor, rendering the prophecy less remarkable. More striking was her forecast of Winston Churchill's 1945 electoral defeat, delivered months before the UK's post-war general election. At a time when Churchill's global stature as a wartime leader seemed unassailable, Dixon insisted he would lose power, a prediction fulfilled when Clement Attlee's Labour Party secured a landslide victory. This example, often highlighted by proponents, underscores her apparent ability to defy conventional wisdom, though detractors again question whether Dixon's prediction was as unequivocal as later narratives suggest. Perhaps her most debated and culturally resonant prophecy concerns the assassination of John F. Kennedy. In 1956, Dixon claimed to have foreseen a president with the initials OSD Hook dying in office, later interpreted as a cryptic reference to Lee Harvey Oswald, OSD, with the hook denoting the W in his middle name, a linguistic stretch critics deem implausible. While Kennedy's 1963 murder cemented this prediction, in public memory, its vagueness exemplifies the retroactive pattern matching common in prophetic lore. Dixon never explicitly named Kennedy or Oswald beforehand, and the initials OSD remain a contested interpretation, with some arguing they could align with other figures or events. This ambiguity highlights a recurring theme in Dixon's career: predictions just specific enough to feel meaningful, yet sufficiently elastic to accommodate multiple outcomes. What emerges from these cases is a complex interplay of chance, selective memory, and cultural myth-making. Dixon's supporters, pointing to her hits, frame her as a visionary who transcended rational explanation, while skeptics emphasize her misses, such as her failed 1960 prediction that World War III would erupt in 1965, or her insistence that Richard Nixon would resign in disgrace years before Watergate, to paint her as a purveyor of cold-reading theatrics. Psychologists argue that her enduring legacy hinges on the Barnum effect, where vague statements feel personally significant, and the human tendency to prioritize hits over misses. Media complicity also played a role. Dixon's syndicated columns and celebrity clientele amplified her correct predictions, while inaccuracies were quietly forgotten. Yet even her critics concede that her cultural impact was undeniable. In an era marked by Cold War paranoia and existential uncertainty, Dixon's prophecies offered a narrative of order, a sense that the chaos of history could be anticipated, if not controlled. Ultimately, Dixon's legacy resides less in the empirical accuracy of her predictions than in what they reveal about humanity's relationship with the unknown. Her hits became cultural touchstones, not because they defied all logic, but because they intersected with pivotal moments in 20th century history, transforming her into a symbol of hope or dread for those seeking meaning in an unpredictable world. Whether viewed as a gifted seer or a masterful illusionist, Jeane Dixon's story underscores a timeless truth. The prophecies we remember are often those that mirror our deepest anxieties and aspirations, refracted through the distorting lens of hindsight. Jeane Dixon's legacy as a prophet of global upheaval hinges on two particularly controversial predictions that continue to spark debate decades after their publication. Her 1971 book, The Call to Glory, and her cryptic warnings about a geopolitical turning point in 2025. In The Call to Glory, Dixon described a harrowing war of disease slated for 2020, a phrase that gained retrospective prominence during the COVID-19 pandemic. Supporters hailed this as another example of her prescience, arguing that the pandemic's timing, global scale and societal disruption aligned uncannily with her vision of a pathogen-driven crisis. However, skeptics dismiss the connection as a classic case of retroactive pattern matching, noting that Dixon's description lacked specifics. She never named a virus, identified a year, or detailed public health measures. Instead, she framed the war of disease within a broader apocalyptic narrative, intertwining it with prophecies of economic collapse and spiritual reckoning, a vagueness that allowed the prediction to be molded to fit multiple crises. Critics also highlighted her track record of similarly broad, unfulfilled health-related warnings, such as a 1968 claim about a deadly flu that would decimate millions, a prediction that never materialized. Yet the allure of the 2020 hit persists, underscoring how prophecies gain traction when they intersect with collective trauma, their ambiguities overshadowed by the human tendency to seek meaning in chaos. Far more contentious and geopolitically charged is Dixon's forecast of a 2025 turning point, marked by a bloody conflict between China and Russia, culminating in China's victory as part of a battle for destiny. This prediction, often cited in contemporary analyses of Sino-Russian relations, has gained renewed attention as tensions simmer over territorial disputes, energy alliances, and competing influence in Central Asia. Dixon's vision portrays the conflict as both a military and ideological clash, with China emerging as a dominant global power, reshaping international order. Proponents argue that her focus on these two nations reflects an intuitive grasp of rising 21st century rivalries, particularly given her Cold War-era context when US-Soviet tensions dominated headlines. Yet the prophecy's ambiguities, no mention of triggers, timelines, or the role of other powers like the US or NATO, leave it open to broad interpretation. Current Sino-Russian cooperation, including energy partnerships and joint military exercises, further complicates the narrative, leading skeptics to dismiss the prediction as a relic of outdated Cold War logic. What unites these prophecies is their reliance on catastrophic imagery and existential stakes, themes that resonate deeply in eras of uncertainty. The war of disease tapped into primal fears of invisible threats, while the 2025 turning point mirrors modern anxieties about shifting power dynamics and resource scarcity. Dixon's approach, melding moralistic warnings with geopolitical speculation, reflects a broader tradition of apocalyptic prophecy, where clarity is sacrificed for dramatic effect. Her work thrives not on precision, but on its ability to evoke visceral reactions, a strategy amplified by followers who fill in the blanks with real-world events. This dynamic raises questions about the ethics of prophetic rhetoric. Do such predictions serve as legitimate cautionary tales, or do they exploit fear to sustain the prophet's relevance? Ultimately, Dixon's prophecies for global upheaval reveal less about the future than about the cultural psyche of her time and ours. The COVID-19 linkage and 2025 speculation persist because they channel contemporary fears into a framework of inevitability, offering the illusion of control through foreknowledge. Whether interpreted as divine insight, shrewd observation, or opportunistic storytelling, these predictions endure as mirrors of humanity's unyielding quest to find order in disorder and certainty in the unknowable. The convergence of Japanese predictions from disparate sources has sparked intrigue and speculation regarding a potential cataclysmic event in the South China Sea, slated for July 5, 2025. Central to these forecasts is a 1999 manga titled The Future I Saw, which outlines 15 prophetic dreams, 14 of which are claimed to have already unfolded with eerie accuracy. These fulfilled predictions include events such as natural disasters, technological advancements, and geopolitical shifts, lending an unsettling credibility to the manga's final, unrealized vision. The 15th dream describes a massive geological catastrophe in the South China Sea, purportedly resulting in the formation of a new landmass that bridges existing islands, a phenomenon that, if realized, could reshape regional geography, ecosystems, and political dynamics. This prophecy finds eerie reinforcement in separate claims, attributed to an anonymous individual who, in online forums dating back to 2011, identified themselves as a time traveler from the year 2062. Prior to the devastating 2011 Tōhoku earthquake and tsunami, this account allegedly issued warnings about the impending disaster, followed by another post in 2022 reiterating the 2025 South China Sea prediction. The time traveler's narrative aligns strikingly with the manga's 15th dream, both in timeline and detail, suggesting an unprecedented seismic or volcanic event that could trigger tsunamis, displace populations, and alter maritime boundaries. The specificity of the July 2025 date, shared across both sources, has fueled debates about whether these predictions stem from coincidence, informed speculation, or a more enigmatic origin. Skeptics argue that the South China Sea, a region already prone to tectonic activity and territorial disputes, is a logical candidate for disaster scenarios, making such forecasts inherently plausible yet unremarkable. Conversely, proponents highlight the manga's track record and the time traveler's pre-2011 warnings as compelling evidence of prescience. Geologists note that while the region sits on the seismically active Ring of Fire, the sudden emergence of a new landmass would require extraordinary volcanic or tectonic forces, an event with no modern precedent. Nevertheless, the alignment of these narratives has prompted discussions about preparedness, particularly given the potential humanitarian and geopolitical ramifications of such a disaster. If realized, the event could exacerbate tensions over territorial claims, disrupt global shipping routes, and devastate coastal communities. The interplay between folklore, speculative fiction, and alleged futuristic testimony underscores humanity's enduring fascination with prophecy and the unknown. Whether viewed as a cautionary tale, a cultural curiosity, or a legitimate warning, the convergence of these predictions serves as a reminder of the fragile balance between natural forces and human civilization, and the enduring power of stories to blur the lines between imagination and reality. The enduring fascination with Jeane Dixon's prophecies lies not only in their alleged foresight, but in their adaptability to shifting historical contexts, inviting reinterpretation as global dynamics evolve. Among the most debated is her vision of a looming war, traditionally interpreted as military conflict, but increasingly reframed by modern analysts as a metaphor for today's economic and technological standoff between the US and China. In an era marked by trade wars, semiconductor rivalries, and AI supremacy battles, Dixon's warnings resonate with those who see Cold War-era binaries giving way to a new kind of warfare, one fought through sanctions, cyber attacks, and supply chain dominance rather than tanks and missiles. This reinterpretation reflects a broader cultural tendency to map prophetic ambiguity onto contemporary anxieties, transforming Dixon's mid-century mysticism into a lens for understanding 21st century power struggles. Yet this flexibility also underscores a critical tension in her work. Prophecies vague enough to align with multiple futures risk becoming Rorschach tests, revealing more about present-day fears than genuine clairvoyance. Central to Dixon's apocalyptic narratives is their dual nature, catastrophe paired with redemption. Alongside dire warnings of global upheaval, she prophesied the rise of a messianic figure embodying boundless love, a spiritual leader who would guide humanity through darkness. This juxtaposition of ruin and renewal speaks to a timeless archetype in prophetic traditions, offering psychological balance. The terror of collapse is tempered by the promise of transcendence. In Dixon's framework, crises are not endpoints but crucibles, forcing societies to confront moral decay and emerge spiritually reborn. Critics argue this structure manipulates hope, allowing prophecies to remain relevant even when specific predictions falter. Yet supporters counter that the duality reflects a nuanced understanding of human resilience, suggesting that adversity can catalyze collective growth, a notion that resonates in today's climate of polycrisis, where pandemics, inequality, and environmental collapse fuel both despair and demands for systemic change. Ultimately, the value of Dixon's prophecies may lie less in their literal accuracy than in their function as societal mirrors and moral provocations. Whether one views her war as a literal Sino-Russian clash, a metaphor for US-China rivalry, or a symbolic clash of ideologies, the underlying imperative remains to heed warnings embedded in these narratives, from the fragility of global systems to the corrosive effects of division. Her invocation of a unifying figure of boundless love, whether interpreted as a religious savior, a political visionary, or an abstract ideal, challenges audiences to consider what leadership and solidarity might look like in times of fracture. In this sense, Dixon's work transcends debates over supernatural legitimacy. It becomes a call to action, urging societies to prioritize cooperation over competition, empathy over exploitation, and preparedness over complacency. Whether inspired by divine insight or human intuition, such messages acquire urgency in an age of existential threats. The true measure of prophecy, then, may not be whether it predicts the future, but whether it inspires us to shape it, choosing solidarity when crises test our capacity for collective survival. As we navigate the enigmatic terrain of prophecy, intuition, and the unexplained, we turn now to you, the curious minds who've journeyed with us through these mysteries. Have you ever experienced a dream that later unfolded in reality, or sensed a looming event before it happened? The stories we've shared, from Jeane Dixon's clairvoyant visions to the eerie foresight of prophetic manga, remind us that the boundaries of human perception remain tantalizingly opaque, and your own experiences could hold keys to understanding this uncharted realm. We invite you to share your stories in the comments below, those moments of uncanny déjà vu, unsettling premonitions, or synchronicities that defy logic. Whether you attribute them to subconscious pattern recognition, spiritual insight, or mere coincidence, these anecdotes enrich our collective exploration of life's mysteries, weaving a tapestry of shared wonder, and perhaps even evidence of a universal sixth sense waiting to be understood. By subscribing to our channel and activating the notification bell, you'll join a community of seekers delving into history's most baffling predictions, modern-day enigmas, and the science or speculation behind them. Each new video is a deep dive into the unknown, from analyses of ancient prophecies resurfacing in today's headlines to investigations of emerging phenomena that challenge our grasp of reality. Your engagement fuels this journey. Every click, comment, and share helps us unearth more stories that straddle the line between the explainable and the extraordinary. As we approach pivotal moments like Dixon's contested 2025 turning point or the ever-shifting landscape of global crises, staying connected ensures you're part of the conversation as new clues emerge and old prophecies are put to the test. The future, as these tales remind us, is not a fixed destination, but a mosaic of choices, chances, and collective consciousness. By sharing your experiences and staying tuned, you contribute to a living archive of humanity's relationship with the unseen. So, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and let's continue this exploration together, because the next great mystery, or the next voice with a fragment of tomorrow's truth, could be yours.